On our newscast tonight, North Korea had been surprisingly quiet despite the start of the joint South Korea U.S. military drills. Until now, one day after President Park Geun-hye attended her first National Security Council meeting in an underground bunker, North Korea speaks out, calling it an open provocation. No progress in the ongoing talks between Hyundai Motor and its union members. The workers decide the time for talk is over. They lay down their tools and provide a list of about 70 demands. More chaos and confusion in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood's spiritual leader is arrested by Egyptian security forces, while Hosni Mubarak, the man who once ruled the nation with an iron fist, could soon be freed from jail. Stay tuned for these stories and more.
It is 11 a.m. in Bern, 2:30 p.m. in New Delhi, and 6 on a Tuesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Han Daeun, filling in for Moon Geon-young this week.
And I'm Daniel Chan. Thank you for joining us. We begin with welcome news for the Korean people. President Park Geun-hye says raising taxes is not the #1 option for raising revenue.
President Park says exposing the underground economy should be the first step in securing the funds needed to fulfill her welfare pledges, not raising tax rates. During a meeting with her senior secretaries on Tuesday, President Park stressed that the government should first root out tax evasion through a crackdown on the black economy and make sure that tax revenues are not used for less urgent matters.
She also expressed her regret over the restrictions added to the Financial Intelligence Unit law, which allows the nation's tax agency to access the intelligence unit's transaction and settlement data when tax evasion is suspected. She pointed out that the revision has made it difficult for the government to raise the amount of revenue it needs.
And staying at the nation's top office, President Park Geun-hye will embark on an 8-day trip to Russia and Vietnam early next month. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has the details.
President Park will make her debut on the stage of multilateral diplomacy during next month's G20 summit in St. Petersburg, Russia. The president is scheduled to arrive in the Russian city on September 4th to attend the 2-day leader summit on the 5th and the 6th, where she will discuss the most pressing global economic and financial issues with other world leaders. During her stay in St. Petersburg, she is also expected to hold bilateral summits with some of the leaders. The presidential office of Changwon told reporters that negotiations are being made through diplomatic channels to set up the summit schedule, but could not confirm who she might meet. Attention is being drawn to whether President Park will meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe amid ongoing tensions between the two nations surrounding historical matters. Reports quoting diplomatic sources say Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida expressed hope to Korea's ambassador to Japan Lee Byung-gi on Monday that the leaders could meet during the G20 summit period. However, Korea's foreign ministry made it clear that nothing has been decided as of yet. After wrapping up her stay in Russia, President Park will make a state visit to Vietnam. On September 9th, she's scheduled to hold a bilateral summit with Vietnamese President Truong Ton Sang and will seek ways to further strengthen cooperation in various fields from trade to security. In particular, the summit agenda will focus on developing the two nations' strategic cooperative relationship, pushing ahead with FTA talks, and increasing cooperation in nuclear power plant projects, all part of President Park's push for sales diplomacy. President Park will also pay a visit to Ho Chi Minh City, where some 1,800 Korean companies operate and some 70,000 Korean residents live. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
In the meantime, North Korea has condemned President Park Geun-hye for holding a National Security Council meeting at the presidential office's crisis management room on Monday, calling it an open provocation. In a statement by North Korea's Committee for the Peaceful Reunification of Korea on Tuesday, Pyongyang said war and peace can never coexist and warned South Korean authorities not to misjudge their sincerity and patience. This is the first official statement released by the North after the start of the annual South Korea U.S. Freedom Guardian military exercise on Monday. The committee went on to say, should the South continue to pursue confrontation with the North, inter-Korean relations will deteriorate, eventually leading to a catastrophic outcome.
Talks between South and North Korea are expected to resume again this week, but the tug of war between the two sides continues over what should be discussed and when.
That's right. North Korea is pushing for talks on reopening the Mount Kumgang tourism resort, and our Kim Ji-yeon tells us why.
What's behind Pyongyang's decision to ask Seoul to resume holding talks on reopening the Mount Kumgang resort to South Korean tourists? Pyongyang is pressing hard for South Korea to discuss the tourism project this week before the two Koreas sit down Friday for talks on resuming reunions for families separated since the Korean War. North Korea experts believe Pyongyang's move is a carefully crafted one, an articulated move to boost the country's flagging economic interests. Economic development was proclaimed as one of leader Kim Jong-un's two main goals to the North Korean people. The other one is building the country's nuclear capabilities. For North Korea, analysts say reopening the Mount Kumgang resort is a viable way to earn hard currency from foreigners in the short run. In the long run, it could be a move to create a synergy effect to boost tourism and in turn advance economic activity in other areas in North Korea, for instance, in a special economic zone in Wonsan.
Pyongyang is trying to nullify South Korea's sanctions against North Korea that are restricting economic trade and activity between the two countries. In addition, Kim Jong-un is trying to make a breakthrough in Mount Kumgang so that it can have a ripple effect to other areas like Wonsan and Mount Mashik.
It's estimated North Korea earned around $40 million every year from Mount Kumgang. Tourist operations at the resort were shut down in 2008 after a tourist from the south was shot dead by a North Korean guard. Seoul still has unresolved concerns to ensure the safety of South Koreans and their properties when visiting North Korea. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korean companies with businesses at Kaesong are scheduled to visit the complex on Thursday and Friday to inspect their facilities and equipment.
Industries related to the supply and electricity machinery will make the first visit on Thursday, and the textile and sewing industries are to follow suit on Friday. 37 South Korean officials visited Kaesong earlier today to examine utility works there. South and North Korea are set to resume dialogue later this week, but the agenda and the venue of the talks are still up in the air.
For an in-depth look at what's happening between the two Koreas, we're joined by Dr. Kim Chol, Senior Research Fellow at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Well, Dr. Kim, from the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Zone, now they want to quickly resume the Mount Kumgang tourism ventures there. North Korea is being quite aggressive in terms of engaging or restarting all these inter-Korean businesses. What's behind their motives, or is it just something that we should embrace and welcome in open arms?
Yes, it seems very aggressive, So I think the North Korean Pyongyang version of offensive dialogue is mixed with all the kind of package deals, starting from Kaesong, all of a sudden Mountain Kumgang and separate family unions. All things, why? And it's very hard to, figure it out, their real intention. But for the last 6 months, for the last half years, from the February 16th nuclear test to the roller coastering up and down, belligerent provocations, all of a sudden changed the mode to the dialogue. So with the backdrop of Chinese pressure, after Chae Yong-hae visited, Beijing, they got a message, and all the international structure has changed so far for the last 6 months. But Pyongyang might have realized that it's last time to reality check, because the South Korean Park Geun-hye government has a different story than the former two liberal governments. So the Park Geun-hye government's inactions to compensate for the insurance for the North South Korean corporation. So I think that message gave a clear, idea to the Pyongyang. So I think all these comes from the internationally synchronized sanctions. That's the starting point. And North Koreans are trying to set up a new idea and image. Particularly Kim Jong-un has solidified his power base. What's next? They are trying to cajole the North Korean general public to the economic development, which needs money. Money is the second and hidden key point at this time.
Well, the two Koreas are still trying to come to terms on where the talks on the family reunion should be held. South Korea suggested it should be held at the truce village of Panmunjom, but North Korea insists it should be held at Mount Kumgang. Why is it so important for North Korea to hold talks there?
Reasonably, Panmunjom is the very easy to access and effective place, but North Koreans are trying to use the Mountain Kumgang resort area, which means the North Korean Kim Jong-un tried to recently develop the Wonsan Special Economic Zone, Mashingneung ski resort area on all the facilities, hotels, and all. I think the separate family reunions will take place in Mountain Kumgang area, which means they are directly trying to linkage that event to the Wonsan. Wonsan desperately need international communities foreign direct investment. So with this event, they're trying to linkage Mountain Kumgang, Wonsan, and so they're trying to sell their new changed image to the international community, particularly the United States and China. So with that, North Korean Pyongyang regime can give a justification to the Beijing to set up a new six-party talks. I think the multi-purpose tactical maneuvering as it used to be, but that's why the South Korean government's trying to step-by-step approach instead of all mixed up like I used the bibimbap strategy. But these things, the sesame oil is that we desperately need at this point the diplomatic decency rather than blaming North Korea and Pyongyang. Oh, your idea is that great, but isn't it this time to the Panmunjom as a kind of tug of war? But at the last minute, we can reach a kind of compromise because of the 18 times experience in terms of North and South Korea separate family reunion. We have lots of experiences.
Right, the last one was in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while, and everyone's really looking forward to that. Now, most of the separate members are over the age of 70, so they better make it quick. One more area of interest for us in terms of the family reunion issue is that it's going to be big, isn't it? It will be big, hopefully. It will be big.
Hopefully, personally, I also myself have a separate family because my grandfather in North Korea, but I don't know whether he's still alive or not. But technically, we can measure up to 10 million people, but registered applicants to the family reunion is in 2010 was 80,000. So in 1988, according to the statistics, almost 130,000 people registered as a separate family. But lots of them passed away, and every year, I think at least 2,000 people are dying away. So isn't it tragedy? So I think this is family reunion at the Chuseok festival holiday is a kind of very humanitarian issue also. It's related to the political and military and economic issue, but a real essence is the humanitarian basic needs to be met. At this 21st century, with no phone calls and direct emails, and it's absolutely absurd. So I think the North and South Korea have to be creative to move on, particularly separate families, but step by step from Kaesong and family union and Kumgang Mountain Resort.
And Dr. Kim, some argue that North Korea may call off all the inter-Korean talks that are going on if Seoul continues to reject North Korea's proposal to hold talks at Mount Kumgang. What's your take on this?
I think that I'm very positive at this point because, like I mentioned, the international structure has changed so far. So I think the North Korean Pyongyang Kim Jong-un regime has solidified his power base. So I think it's time they desperately need money. So I think all these kind of events and Kaesong and those kind of events and proposals and talks about talks can give a new perception to the international community. So I think they're trying to use that kind of perception and maneuvering as bargaining point and a bargaining chip to move ahead.
So it's good that North Korea is finally seeing the light in that sense, thinking more logically. Now, what we call trust politic by President Park Geun-hye, it seems to be working, playing hardball the right way, or tough love at the right time. But things have to change and evolve. So how do you think her North Korean policy could or should be reshaped in the future?
I'm not in the position to impose the new policy, but Park Geun-hye's principle-based trust policy is very internationally accepted and recognized politics. So I think they got like a building blocks, starting from principle-based, not rewarding for the bad behavior. So I think it's a step-by-step approach. It's very good thing. So, but things we have to keep an eye on is instead of the deep inside of the box, the stereotype box, it's time to get out of the box with a very diplomatically decent, approach and encouragement. So I think but in terms of military drills, we have to do the same military training and drill, which for freedom guardian is a different story. So I think Park Geun-hye's government is I'm not admiring that, but it's getting recognition even from the Korean general public, from the international society. I think this is the right place. So I think the step-by-step, principle-based, this kind of a trusted politics is a very good selection out of the option.
So no dramatic change required or necessary at the moment?
Change, but controlled change.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Kim, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
This is my pleasure.
A set of public hearings over human rights in North Korea is underway in Seoul. For the next 4 days, some 30 witnesses are set to testify in front of a 3-member UN panel about human rights violations in the communist state.
Around 200,000 people are believed to be imprisoned in North Korea's labor camps where they are malnourished or even worked to death. Pyongyang denies the accusations and says it will not allow the UN inspectors on North Korean soil. This is the first time an expert panel has started looking into human rights abuses in North Korea.
State prosecutors probing former strongman President Chun Doo-hwan's illegally amassed assets have made the first arrest in relation to the case. Chun's brother-in-law has been taken into custody on suspicion of evading taxes to illegally transfer wealth to one of the ex-president's sons. Our Kim Hyun-ji has the story.
Former President Chun Doo-hwan's brother-in-law, Lee Chang-seok, is the first relative of Chun to have been detained since the prosecution launched a probe to reclaim the ex-president's wealth. Chun has been convicted of having illegally raked in hundreds of millions of dollars through bribes from big businesses during his authoritarian rule in the 1980s. And the ex-president's brother-in-law has long been suspected of being the caretaker of Chun's illegal funds, which prosecutors believe have been stashed away in paper companies and bank accounts associated with Chun's family members. Lee Chang-seok, who was placed in a Seoul detention center late Monday, is accused of evading taxes worth $11 million in 2 separate land transactions, one of which directly involves one of Chun's sons. In 2006, Lee sold 460,000 square meters of land in Osan, just south of Seoul, to Chun's second son, Jae-yong, for just 1/10 of its officially appraised value. Prosecutors allege Lee evaded gift and other taxes worth some $5 million in the process. Prosecutors also suspect the Osan land might have been purchased with the ex-president's illegal funds. In 1997, Chun was ordered by the nation's top court to return to state coffers some $197 million of the money he illegally amassed while in office. Chun, who came to power through a 1979 military coup, has only paid a quarter of this fine since then, saying that he doesn't have a penny to rub together. With the arrest of the ex-president's brother-in-law, prosecutors are widely expected to summon the ex-president's son, Chun Jae-yong, who has been implicated in an illegal land transaction. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Labor union members from Korea's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, began a two-day partial strike today. The strike is seen as a move to pressure the company before the two sides meet for talks this Wednesday. Our Yudian reports.
Members of the 45,000-strong Hyundai Motor Union will set aside their tools for 2 hours on Tuesday and Wednesday. The union workers will split into two groups and alternate taking part in a 2-hour strike over the 2 days. And on Wednesday, the union leaders are set to meet with company officials to continue negotiations. The union says they decided to go on a strike because there has been no progress in the ongoing talks. But Hyundai expressed disappointment over the strike and especially the timing of it, as the company's operating profits have dropped by 28% in the first half of the year compared to the same period last year.
The union refused the Central Labor Relations Committee's recommendation to look for a compromise and went on strike. We express regret over the union's decision, given our efforts to continue talks.
The union has laid out about 70 demands to the automaker, which include $8,900 to support job-seeking children who do not go to college, a little over $100 raise in monthly base income, as well as a 35% discount off of Hyundai cars for long-term employees. Hyundai's massive strike last year halted production of more than 82,000 cars, which amounts to about $1.5 billion. But analysts say another extensive strike is unlikely this year, given the negative impacts that the continued strikes had on the company's output as well as reputation. Yurian, Arirang News.
September promises to be an exciting month for IT fans and consumers, with Apple and Samsung both gearing up to release new gadgets. Apple is reportedly planning to launch 2 new iPhone models in early September. The Washington Post reported Tuesday that the U.S. tech giant has asked its suppliers in Taiwan to begin shipping both high-end and low-end iPhone models next month. The higher-end version will reportedly feature a metal casing, while the lower-end one will come with a lower price tag. Not to be left out, Samsung Electronics is planning to launch the latest incarnation of its Galaxy Note tablet on September 4th, along with a smartwatch. In a frenzied period of major developments in Egypt, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood was arrested Tuesday as the military continues its crackdown on Islamists. This news broke a matter of hours after it was announced that former President Hosni Mubarak could be freed. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The Muslim Brotherhood spiritual leader, Mohammed Badi, was arrested by Egyptian security forces in the early hours of Tuesday morning. Badi is charged with inciting violence along the Muslim Brotherhood back in July. He and 2 of his deputies are scheduled for trial on August 25th. Meanwhile, Hosni Mubarak, the man who ruled Egypt with the iron fist for 3 decades, could soon be freed from jail after a court ruling on Monday said he could no longer be held for corruption charges. Mubarak once commanded armed forces deposed the elected Islamist successor, Mohammed Morsi, to spark the bloodiest internal conflict. The conflict in the past 6 weeks was the deadliest in the modern history of the Arab state. Since the army detained Mohammed Morsi on July 3rd, hundreds of casualties and dozens of security personnel have been killed, including 25 police officers who have been executed on Monday by armed militants in the northern city of Rafah. Mubarak is now 85 and has been in prison since April 2011. Even with his release, he may have no political future and could raise questions that a new form of military-backed government could take place. Meanwhile, EU foreign ministers will convene in Brussels Wednesday for an emergency meeting to find ways to broker a peaceful compromise between the army-backed interim government and supporters of deposed President Mohammed Morsi. Officials says options on the table include cutting back the EU's $6.7 billion package of grants and loans promised last year and imposing an arms embargo on Cairo. Several foreign ministers have called for a cutback or severing of aid to Cairo. But many diplomats say such a course of action would hurt the Egyptian people more than the government. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
It's time for weather. We turn to our Hannah Kim. Hannah, this extreme heat can't be good for the agriculture industries in Korea, right?
That's right, Daniel. It's very unfortunate for the farmers, but experts say that it costs roughly $2 million to recover the losses on the farms in the South Jeolla province.
But Hannah, I feel like temperatures have cooled off a bit.
That's right, and we are expecting rain in all parts of the nation, mostly in the Gyeongsang and Jeolla province later this week. So yes, town, it will definitely cool things down, putting temperatures below the 30s. Now tomorrow we expect mostly cloudy skies and we have some regional rain, but it should only be passing showers. If we take a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, Seoul will start off the morning at 26 and reach 33 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, cities in the south like Gwangju and Busan will peak at 35 and 31 degrees respectively. As you can see, it is a lot cooler down in Busan. Down on Jeju Island, you'll have mostly cloudy skies with breaks of sun in the daytime. Daejeon will be a little hotter, hitting 35, while Mount Kumgang cools off to 26. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm Hannah Kim, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Hannah. And that's all from us. Thank you for watching.
Keep it tuned to Arirang for more news coming your way.